Let's chat about early finishers during your math block. Now remember, we don't want to punish our students for completing their work, which means we don't want to give them extra work or here's another worksheet, solve these 100 problems, because then our students aren't going to be as motivated, right, to complete work in a timely manner. So you're going to want to come up with a system for your early finishers so that they're not interrupting you if you're working in a small, guided math group. They just know exactly what to do, just like you do with your ELA centers. Now, what you're going to want to do is figure out, where are they going to work? Are they going to stay at their seat? Are they going to work on the carpet? What does that look like? What is the voice level going to look like? And then cleaning up when time is up, what happens next so that it's a seamless process. Now, in my classroom, we always have a clipboard for unfinished work. So my students know that anytime they're done with anything throughout the day, they get started on anything on their clipboard before they move on to a different activity. Now, during ELA time, they are only working on ELA activities on their clipboard. Same goes for math. Because what's going to end up happening is your friends who struggle, they just struggle in general, they're going to need extra support, right? And if during math time they're working on their clipboard or on ELA things, but they still need more help with math, it's not really supporting them or extending the learning that they're currently doing right now in math. So I have a rule. If it's math time, you are working on anything on your clipboard that is math related. So maybe they didn't finish a warm up from yesterday or something, that was independent practice on Monday. So it gives them time to get all caught up. Now, what I do with my students who finish early during a warm-up. We had warm-ups Monday through Thursday. It was a piece of paper. It went in their notebook with a couple problems to solve. Now, what I found early on is that my students who were done would just sit there looking around, talking to their neighbor, and I needed to give them something meaningful. So in our classroom, they knew the system anytime they completed their warm-up early, and the warm-up was about 7 minutes long, okay? So I'm not going to say, okay, go log onto the computer and work on a game or go get a math center. We don't have enough time for that. Oftentimes they're done maybe 2 or 3 minutes early. So what they did is they checked their work with another early finisher. So in our classroom, the system was, when you're finished with your warm-up, you stand up, you go to the carpet, and you wait for someone else, and typically someone gets there pretty quickly, so that you guys can collaborate and share how you solved the problems. You're explaining your thinking. They're getting a lot of rich math talk going on during this time. I didn't have to prep anything. I didn't have to check anything. And what was really powerful about this is that they were able to see their work and how they did right away. So they got that immediate feedback. It also gave them time, if they were disagreeing on one of the answers, to give their reasoning and use what they know about numbers and math to prove their point. And then if someone, didn't have it correct, then they could go back and fix it before the time was up. So that's something you can do with your warm-up activities. And I do this not just during math. We did this for everything in our classroom. And it just gave them a lot of time to practice collaborating. As you know, if you're using Common Core, that is one of the big standards. Now, what do you do with your early finishers who are done with their independent practice, or maybe they're done early when they're finishing up a math quiz or a test? Good question. So this is the same thing. You're going to want to set up your system, right? If it's during a quiz or test, you want to be very, very clear on your guidelines. What I found with my early finishers during this time is sometimes it would get, a little noisier. And if I have students who are still taking a quiz or a test, I want to be respectful of their learning environment. So my students knew during quiz or test time that they were allowed to work on an activity independently. They weren't playing a partner game, because, kids get excited and they start to chat, and I don't want to disrupt anyone else's learning. So be clear on your guidelines or your expectations during that time. Now here's what we did. I set up an area in our classroom. That is where all of the centers went, as you can see. I have them labeled on the standard, or the overarching standard, and we had different center games. Now my students are very familiar with these games. These are games they've either played with me during guided math, they've already played them during center time, and so it was an opportunity for them to get that enrichment or to get that extra practice without me having to copy a bunch of things or prepare anything. I already had this ready to go. So my students knew that they could come over and grab an activity. Now, I've shared this before as well. If I want to kind of guide the activity that they're going to choose, what I did is I would switch out the baskets on the top of the shelf. So as you can see on the left, measurement, that's what we were focusing on, let's say during that month or that 6 weeks. So I really only wanted them to choose a measurement game. Now the basket to the right, addition and subtraction, that was our year-long standard we focused on all the time. And I found as a teacher early on in my career is sometimes I would teach a standard and we would just move on from it. We wouldn't revisit it again because I'm just trying to get through the curriculum, right? Can you relate to that? And so I didn't want to do that with this. So that's why I switch out the centers. That's why I keep the addition and subtraction up there, because there's a lot of standards that my students needed to know. And then eventually I change out measurement with a different topic. And then as the year went on, then my students had the option, as you can see those 4 baskets there, they had the option to choose 4 standards, overarching standards to choose from. So it wasn't just measurement or addition and subtraction. It's up to you how you want to do it. That's what I found worked best for us, and it wasn't something I had to manage as much. You may be thinking, well, what if they go play the same game? To me, it didn't really matter. I didn't notice it too much. I mean, there were a couple games my kids really loved, but as long as they're learning, right, I was good with it, and I gave them lots of variety. So it really wasn't an issue in our classroom. And then as you can see down below, those buckets are just from Dollar Tree, and they had our shape manipulatives to the right. And then let's see, the gray basket that has like a little zipper pocket inside had 2 sticks or 2 groups of 10 Unifix cubes and like some dice. And then my students would take that and go play with it, just because it was already done, counted out for them. It's really up to you, and it's kind of just where our extra base 10 blocks and things like that went. Here's just a view inside of what the centers look like. I've shared about this before. We put the center in a Ziploc bag. All the pieces that they need, if there's cards or recording sheets or whatever, it's all in there. I oftentimes though didn't include recording sheets, like the pencil and paper type. It was more laminated so they could record their answers and then when they're done, be done with it. And then depending on right now and what safety protocols look like, you're going to have to make this choice on how you want to lay out the tools that your students are going to use. So their dice, flashcards, rulers, what does that look like? What I probably would be doing right now is just to have a zipper pouch, and each student has their own zipper pouch that they keep with them, and it will have all the manipulatives that they need, maybe just for that quarter. I wouldn't want to give them everything right now because, things get lost, and I probably wouldn't do that. So it's up to you, like I said, depending on safety, how that looks. This is what it looked like in a classroom before pandemic. So you're eventually going to get back to here. And what I did is I used just a shoe organizer, and my students would come grab whatever it is that they needed, go play their game, and when it was time to clean up, they would put everything back. If you can see in the top, there is a blue cup. I don't remember why that's so high. I ended up moving it down. That was full of paper clips. We used the jumbo paper clips because my students, a lot of the games involved a spinner. And when I first started teaching, I would make my own spinners, with a brad and a spinner, and it took a lot of time. I don't have time for that. And so this was really, really easy. My students would grab a paper clip and a pencil, and they'd use that as their spinner. And then when they were done, they put the paper clip back. That was really just a big time saver rather than me passing everything out. Now you're also going to want an area wherever your devices may be stored. We use this as an extra center where our students would log on to whatever our district purchased for math software, I guess that would be their online games. That's where they would go and grab that. We eventually had a Chromebook cart that we rotated throughout our grade level, so we had those as well. And then it's where my students would go and practice. I liked it to have some structure. So what I mean by that is it wasn't a free-for-all, like go find a game online. It was guided, but they had, kind of choice on what game they were going to choose. Now I often get asked, well, do you check their work? I don't for my early finishers who are doing, an extension activity or a challenge activity. This is for them to work independently. And then typically what I'm doing during this time is working with a small group or working with students maybe who need some more support, who are still, working back at their seats. Now, if you wanted to check, what you could do is have them take a picture if you're using Seesaw and put it on there, and they can just, use the mic option and explain what they worked on. Something that holds me back from that is I don't want it to be too many steps for them, especially if they've only got a couple minutes. I don't want it to be too tedious, and I want to reward them for completing their work. So that's kind of what we do. And then when we are all finished, timer goes off and my students clean up. And then if we're working on something independently, that's when everyone's cleaning up. About 2 minutes, they go back to their seats, take out their correcting marker, we correct whatever they just worked on, and then we're done and we move on. Now, if you're thinking right now, well, I want to do this, but safety protocols are very strict, as they should be. You'll want to be thinking about what's it going to look like cleaning for you. If it were me, I would have a basket out. So when my students were done playing that center, rather than putting it back where it typically would go, they'll put it in the basket. And we can disinfect it with a Clorox wipe, leave it there for a couple days, the kids don't touch it. Then we can put it back in center rotation once, all the germs are gone. But I would have them put their centers in there. You could have them put their materials. If you guys are sharing materials, if they have their own pouch with their own materials, I would just have them take that back to their seat. So it's really up to you kind of what